Hi guys, this is Haley Ferguson. This is my school law presentation on tort liability. So what is tort liability? Tort is a legal term that describes a violation where one person causes damage, injury, or harm to another person, and tort liability means that the person responsible for the violation must be held liable and reimburse the victim for any wrongdoings. Individuals are responsible for their own conduct or lack thereof. There are two types of tort liability: intentional tort and negligent tort. Intentional torts are when an individual attempts or intends to cause harm. There are four types of intentional torts: assault, battery, false imprisonment, and defamation. And for negligent torts, it's when an individual is not doing their job correctly or not paying attention. So there are four types of negligent torts, which is breach, duty, proximate cause, and injury. So we'll go through some examples. So we have Frame versus Como. The key players: Frame was a student and Como was a substitute teacher. The situation, the students were acting pretty rowdy. Como was substituting for Frame's class, and the class was being super disruptive. Como grabbed Frame by the arm and attempted to remove him from class, and Frame became off balance, and this caused him to stumble and hit the blackboard. Frame filed suit for assault and battery. So the courts ruled that Como committed a battery, but his actions were justified because Frame's actions were sufficient enough to provoke this reaction. And here's a picture of a student being forced up against a blackboard. And so if this had happened at my school, I would immediately bring in the teacher or substitute for an investigation, get their side of the story. Anytime a staff member puts their hands on a student, it should be addressed or documented, even if it's just breaking up a fight or removing them from the classroom. And I think a report should be filed with the school. The biggest thing that I gathered from one of my classroom management classes in my undergrad is that documentation is key. You always want to document everything, make sure that it's on file so you can show the steps that you've taken. And then the proactive measures that I would take to be able to ensure that my staff is properly trained in how to calm down a combative student or be aware that they can call security. At the school I currently work at, we just call security. A fight broke out in my classroom once. It was actually a girl just absolutely beating this huge guy, and he wasn't hitting her back, thank goodness, but I just pressed the button, called for security, and they were down there because they know the exact steps to take, what force to use, and all that, whereas I'm not trained in that. So teachers have to remain professional and ethical, during an altercation like that. So Flanagan versus Canton. The key players: Flanagan was a 5th grade student in gym class, and Canton was the school district. The situation, students in gym class were being unruly. The teacher sat them down and lectured them about respect and listening. And then the teacher just sent the students to the locker rooms to change back into their school clothes to be released for the day. A student pushed Flanagan into the locker room and he sustained injuries, and his mom sued the school district for negligence. The outcome, the court sided with Flanagan and his family because students were extra unruly that day, and they argued that the teacher should be more aware and more present in that situation. So the evaluation for this case, if this happened in my school as an administrator, I would want to speak to the teacher and get their side of the story as well. I would document everything, like I said before. That's key. Even with little things, you should document everything. And then I would also bring in the parents and the student. To ensure that wouldn't happen again, I would require PE teachers to have a station in the locker room. This could just be in the doorway of the locker room, or if there's an office in the locker room, just being a little bit closer than just in the gym doing, whatever. But that way teachers could be more aware of what's going on in the locker rooms without having to be in there, because to me that opens up a whole nother discussion. But having teachers pretty close to the situation so they can either hear what's going on and then intervene or be aware of what's happening. And safety should be their number one priority overall. The next one, Philadelphia versus Brewing. So Jarrett Brewing was a student in gym class, and he claimed he was running full force, running too fast, and fell and hit a wall and hit his head. He was knocked unconscious and sustained a mild brain injury. And the outcome, the court stated that the school failed to provide a safe environment as Brewing ran into an unpadded concrete wall. And as a building administrator, I would first take a statement from the gym teacher and then look into how to make the gym safer to ensure that this doesn't happen again. While I do think that there is some assumption of risk while in gym class, I would want to minimize the risk by covering up the wall with padding, just trying to make our gym as safe as possible so that doesn't happen again, because safety is the first priority. And then for Peter W. versus San Francisco Unified School District, the key players were Peter, a student that had just graduated in the San Francisco School District. The situation, a graduated student sues the school district for failing to educate him properly over his 12 years of education in the district. The student claimed that he could only read at a 5th grade level and that he was underqualified for the jobs that he was applying for that required reading and writing skills. And the outcome was that the courts rejected Peter's claim of malpractice, stating that it was too difficult to define duty to educate and causation for why he was reading at a certain level. And I agree with the court's ruling. I think it is too difficult to determine the causation of these claims. And there's so many factors that feed into this, and it's different for every student. With that being said, I think as a building administrator, I would ensure that we were giving our best students the best education possible. This includes designing or updating curriculum or giving assessments to make sure that students are reading at an appropriate level. Because for me, this would be slightly concerning. I would want to look at data to see if it's just this one kid that's struggling, or if across the board every student is not reading at an appropriate level. That would be concerning to me, and that's something that I would have to look into as a leader in the building to see what can we do better. Now, there are those cases where it is just this one kid that's like, I didn't learn anything, I'm reading at a 5th grade level, but if it's across the board, that definitely needs to be addressed. For Daly versus Los Angeles Unified School District, William Daly was the father of 16-year-old Michael Daly, who was a student, and Raymond Maggard was the department chair of the physical education classes. Students were finishing lunch early and they headed to the gym. Their next class was in PE. There was no adult supervision because there was no scheduled class at the time. So the teacher was in his office, eating lunch, getting stuff ready for the next class. And Michael and other students began slapboxing. This continued for about 10 minutes and a crowd of 30 kids began to watch. And at one point, Michael fell backwards and hit his skull. He later died that evening. Michael's family sued for negligence and argued that the school should have provided adequate supervision. The court ruled that there was no negligence on the school's part, and then Michael's parents appealed this case, and a new trial was granted, and the court reversed their decision. And then in the school I currently work at, students go to the gym all the time. They say they're going to the bathroom, and then you find them 30 minutes later playing basketball in the gym. So that happens a lot. It happens during lunch, during classes. But if I were the administrator, I would make it mandatory for the doors to be locked and to have security there until classes started. So if there's no classes occurring in the gym, all the doors are locked. You can't get in unless you have a key, unless you're a teacher or an administrator or security. This was an unfortunate event, but I don't think that teacher was responsible. If he had had a class at the time and this was occurring, he would absolutely be responsible. But because he was on lunch or on a break, then I think that that's not his issue. But to combat this, we will now lock all the doors. And this relates to ethics in schools because teachers have a duty to keep students safe, but they can't prevent all things and be everywhere at once. So that is my presentation on tort liability.